Welcome to the Revenue Rewired podcast, hosted by StringCan Interactive's visionary CEO, Jay Feitlinger, and no-nonsense COO, Sarah Shepard. We're here to accelerate your revenue and give your marketing purpose. Hello, and welcome everybody to this special, and we do mean special, episode of the Revenue Rewired podcast. Jay and I had planned on this podcast earlier, and now we actually have stories to go with it. So if you've been enjoying hearing about some of our, shenanigans, you love that word, Jay, shenanigans.
I do.
This
It's a good
is a
one.
really good one. So, one of the things that we hear often from SMB owners, entrepreneurs, and actually ourselves is that the owner can become the bottleneck. It's really the bottleneck that no one wants to talk about, the owner. And with this episode, we have some great personal stories to share with you all that hopefully you can learn from us. And it's our job to make your lives easier with this podcast. And we are so committed to this podcast that I am doing it from Lisbon in a hot apartment. And Jay, tell everyone where you are and what you're doing.
I'm home now, but I was in the hospital.
Oh, why were you in the hospital, Jay?
So we're going there, huh?
Yes,
Uh,
yes, you are going to tell everyone.
well, let me try to spin it from a positive perspective because it shows how driven I am. Unfortunately, the way my brain is working, or always has worked, is if there's a task at hand, I can figure out how to do it myself. And we are in the process of selling one of our kids' cars as she's heading off to study abroad. And I noticed that the rain guard, splash guard, whatever it's called, under the engine was loose. And so I wanted to go to the store and buy some bolts to just reattach it, but I couldn't count how many were missing. So I thought it'd be smart just to jack up the car and go under there and count the bolts missing. And of course, as I'm coming back out of doing that, the jack slipped and the car fell on top of me. So that was very scary. And I know I'm making light of it, but it was definitely one of those moments in my life where I knew what I was doing was dangerous and I just didn't think it through against my wife's wishes. And it was definitely a scary moment. Luckily, I survived. I was in the hospital for a few days and I broke a lot of body parts. But here I am, as committed as you said, Sarah, on the podcast.
So we ask for everyone's forgiveness if, this one sounds a little different. We're doing different equipment, and Jay may or may not have had a painkiller recently, but but
It's
we
so
are, if
good.
nothing, we are committed. I was thinking about that today, Jay. Like you and I, there is nothing that keeps us down. So,
No, but I mean, what
uh,
I love about this is we last week planned on, having this podcast. I obviously was going to be in the office in our little makeshift podcast studio on all the right equipment. And I knew you obviously would be in Portugal. And so luckily I had an extra device at the home office. But the topic we chose last week was what we're doing today. And what I'm loving about this more than ever, and obviously I think those that know me, both me and you are very transparent when it comes to the good and the bad and the ugly. And I just feel like, now this topic has a very different perspective because, unfortunately, this did happen partly over the weekend, but also partly into the work week. And I think obviously you want to maybe touch on that for a second regarding, how relevant this topic is now with our current situation.
yeah, and this one will come out a little bit after the fact, and you'll listen to it and be hopefully a little more healed by then. But I think there's expected time away, the owner, and then there's unexpected time away. And, you may or may not realize how much of a bottleneck you are in those spaces. And I think, planning for the worst is something that I am. I hate saying I'm good at it because that makes me sound like I'm a pessimist. I'm not, but I definitely am a risk assessor. And, Jay and I joke about the document that we have where I have pretty much every scenario that could possibly happen within reason to Jay, including, and this is not a joke, pirates. If pirates were to take over Jay's cruise ship when he went on a cruise to Mexico many years ago, I was very concerned. What do I do with the business if, you get taken and I don't hear from you? I think it's incognito is what it's,
It's
or
so funny.
incommunicado, not incognito. I live on Chrome too much. But, this one is really important, I think, from a revenue perspective because we are so driven and dedicated and disciplined, that also can create a really sticky situation with you and your team because you sort of feel like you have to be involved in everything, especially if you're an entrepreneur. And Jay, maybe you touch on that a little bit about have you, and I don't know that I've ever asked you this question this way, have you ever noticed, or when did you notice that you were a bottleneck?
God, wow, that's a good question. I think honestly, when you started working with me, how many years now has it been? 10? I don't know.
10 years.
10 years. So I think I realized that when you had started, because the team members that essentially required me to have you come on board, they asked me to build kind of like a SOP, and they literally asked me to build like a 1 or 2 page document that kind of walks through the things that I'm doing that I thought might be good to delegate to have, your kind of operational wired brain take over. A document I think ended up being what, 30 pages long. And
I
it was
should
just,
dig it up.
I mean, it was complete nonsense. And what's interesting is once you came on board and I saw the power of delegating and putting trust into others that are smarter than you, um, referring to me. That's when I started getting really involved in things like Dan Sullivan's program Strategic Coach, about 10xing your business and getting really involved in various different boards of advisors and entrepreneurs organization and YPO and all those kind of things. And I'll never forget many years ago, probably about nine or so years ago, when I learned the idea of either you work in your business or on your business. And I realized, and it took me a few years in full transparency to really evolve, because I just had that insane mindset that if it's not done by me or done my way, it's not done the right way. And that's just the wrong way to think about it. And that's probably one of the reasons why our business is not, you know, $5 or $10 million more than it is right now, because I got in the way, not realizing that I was the bottleneck. And so I think, as been working with you, and you've done a really good job, especially those first couple of years, on making me realize where I was causing issues, even though I thought I was helping. It was very eye-opening, obviously painful sometimes, and I'm sure I pushed back a fair amount in the beginning. But I know you always use that canary in the coal mine, phrasing when you notice that I once in a while slip back. And I don't think it happens very often the last couple of years. But I know the first probably 5 years or so, it happened, well, hopefully not daily, but I know it happened at least weekly. And so that's where I think it wasn't really like a single moment, but I think where my eyes started opening up to your question was when I was starting to being asked to practice what I preach, because I'm so good at helping other people think about, delegating to elevate. And I never really did a good job on it for myself. And that's not really, I think, a very powerful leadership move if you can't practice what you preach. And so I think, for those first couple of years, me working through that process, it really opened up my eyes to the possibilities so I can kind of stay in my lane, and not cause, ruckus.
Ruckus. Yeah, I
Just
think,
age
some of
myself.
this, a little bit.
Sorry.
I think some of those symptoms, what this looks like is there's all kinds of stuff waiting for your approval if you're in a system and an email, and you're just starting to feel this maybe choking sensation of all the work that is waiting for you and anxiety. Like, people are waiting on you. There's this immense amount of pressure. Things are being done, but nothing seems to actually be moving. It's that rocking chair, wheelchair thing that we talked about before. It's like a little bit of it is this question of, am I struggling because it's a capacity issue truly and deeply, or is this a control issue? And that's a hard question as a human being, especially when it's your business, it's your baby. Obviously, no one can do it better than you can as the owner entrepreneur, or even some, C-suite executives. They have such an extreme amount of ownership that there is this battle for, I'm a human being and I can only do so much, but I feel this desire to control everything and make it, perfect. And if you're feeling really frustrated with your team, that is probably one of the first questions I would ask. Is this, am I the one? Am I bottlenecking? Am I slowing things down? And I'm not really empowering them to fix things, to make decisions, to whatever those are. And then you really have to figure out, like, well, why is this happening? Because looking at the deeper issue, so often humans are not good at getting to the root of the issue, especially when it's something that we know we're doing. Maybe it's maybe not totally intentional, but it's like, if I address this, this is deep. This is deep stuff. Like, I have this control issue because of probably getting burned in the past by other team members or employees or partners, and then that just continues because it's easy. It's easy to keep yourself from handling future hard things that haven't happened because you're living from a place in the past of things that have happened. And I don't
Right.
know if I'm Freuding you too much on the air.
Oh my God, this is very uncomfortable. I'm actually sweating, but I don't know if it's because I'm in pain or you're like putting me on the hot seat. But
Do you
I
live in
do want to say
Arizona?
one thing real fast before you start maybe asking me some harder questions here. You did make a comment, and I do want to say that about the no one could do it better than you. And I'm not sure if that's what you really meant or not, but that was, I think, a false understanding that I had. I know I'm really, really good at what I do. And I have a very, very high level of confidence with that. But I think that is what was tied to the problem. I would think it was probably 80% lack of trust. Even though I I masked it as other things because I hate saying I don't trust people. But I know deep down that's what it was about. And then the remaining part was I believed strongly in my head that I was the smartest person in the room or whatever. I was the best one to do something. I could do it faster or smarter. And what I have found is that just you can't scale a business thinking that way. And I think if you can really develop guidelines and help the people that you're hiring on that you hopefully are trusting, I'm blown away by how much smarter the team could be than me. And so, that probably took me a few years to realize that maybe I might be the smartest person in the room, but if I don't give people the chance, the outcomes are not going to be better. And one plus one is definitely, stronger than two. And I think also the thing I want to say, as you were just talking, I thought about this, and I don't know why I didn't think about it till now, but the second day I was in the hospital, the one of the doctors came in and asked me what I did for a living, and I said, I'm in, working in for a marketing agency, blah blah blah, and he asked me if he needed to write a note to my boss. And actually, Rachel happened to be there, my wife, and she was laughing about that because basically I don't really have one besides maybe Rachel and you, Sarah. But I have to say, I said, of course, I don't need one. And then I did go on my phone and look at my week. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I said this to Rachel. I'm like, this was probably a great week for this to happen. I had a bunch of meetings, but these were meetings that, if I didn't go to, wasn't a big deal. And then I looked at the next few weeks and I had a similar situation. And it was a weird moment for me where maybe, again, it was partly the amount of pain and drugs I was on. But I was really proud because I feel like we finally got to the place where the business can run for a lot longer than a week or two or three without me. Because we've done such I guess, a good job with trusting our team. And there's been so many meetings this week that I just didn't attend because I wasn't feeling well. And the meetings went well, if not better, because I wasn't there. So I think for me, it's the that failed mindset of an entrepreneur doesn't realize that they're the ones that are causing the bottleneck. I love this topic because it's probably, if you look really, really hard in the mirror, it's probably the reason why the business has not already been 10xing because they're getting in the way of that opportunity.
Yeah, and I do really want to throw a shout out to the team if they're listening. Are you guys listening?
Hopefully they are test.
I will make sure they listen to this one because of the shout out. But we've had a couple of things in the last, 2 months or so. We had another leadership team member unexpectedly go out with a health issue, and we've had a bunch of people take some nice vacations, and it feels really good that, I actually called that out in one of my check-ins with that leadership team member, that what an amazing thing that is to have all of that happen. And the team is no worse for the wear. And in some instances, not every client was made aware of that in that moment, and things just happened. And I really attribute our systems, our processes, the fact that we're all cross-trained, the way we communicate. Maybe I'm jumping ahead to solutions, but to your point, Jay, I've had a lot of instances in this last quarter where this used to be a huge issue and it's very painful. And yes, it impacts revenue a lot. And I think because of the personal situations that you and I are both in, this topic was like, oh, we got some juicy personal moments to share, because when and if, and we hope if this doesn't happen to you, please, people, leave carjacking to the professionals. Um, not
I'm not a
stealing, but
mechanic, I guess.
like mechanic stuff. But um, it really is impactful when your team has empowerment. And I struggle personally from a leadership perspective of, I had this perfectionism issue, and Jane, thankfully, my coach, helped me get through that. And that too, it shows up a lot. So it's not just owner entrepreneurs, it is people with extreme ownership types of mindsets that can also be sucked into this bottleneck trap, you know?
You know, what I was thinking actually, and maybe that's what your plan was going to be when we get, as far as start wrapping up this show. But Sarah, you did bring up the that pirate, which actually is really serious. That you added that into our that crazy document of kind of succession planning. But I think, that process we went through was also very eye-opening. And I think it'd be valuable to those listening to this show is maybe share a little bit about that as we get towards wrapping this up, because the process we went through to identify all the things we already knew have happened in the past regarding someone getting hurt or a death in the family or a client financial crisis or whatever, all the crazy nuclear bomb stuff, and then the fun process of you coming up. I don't And this was pre chat GBT, so I don't even know how you came up with half these
Oh my
crazy
gosh, I
things.
don't
Like,
even know what ChatGPT would say about this document.
no, it's hysterical. But like I've shared this with friends that own, $50 million plus businesses, and they were like, there are things in here that I never would have thought of. And then they went back to their team and they added those items in because you really thought through some crazy doomsday stuff, and everything from like, what if Jay's right index finger fell off? What happens? Like you thought through I mean, some of it I think was obnoxious and obscene, some of the things you came up with. But I think overall it was a really interesting process. So I think it would be beneficial maybe to share a little bit about that, because I think, again, not to be defensive, but obviously I'm very, empathetic to, entrepreneurs, is you're moving so fast, and you're typically so driven, and you're typically known as being the problem solver. And it feels good to be that problem solver. It's not easy to look in the mirror and be like, "Ooh, I'm causing these 49 bottlenecks." And I think that, a lot of times someone like me needs someone like you, Sarah, to make me aware of it. And I think you do a really good job of not making me feel bad about it, because I think I come from a place of of goodness when I'm doing stuff. I just feel like I see an opportunity and I don't want to lose the opportunity, so I just go. But I think it takes away from not only the person that I stole the opportunity from, but also the company from growing. So maybe as we get towards that, act three of this, and the solution part, I think it would be valuable for you maybe to talk through a little bit regarding steps that an entrepreneur could take to help recognize where they need to think about the bottlenecks, and then, what the process might look like and how they could find people or processes to help them address it, So that way, if and when a stupid car falls on them or something worse, the company is being taken care of.
Well, and I appreciate what you said. To be fair though, there is another side of this where someone might be listening and saying, "Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I'm not the bottleneck." But facing the fact that their business should be set up to run without them is a whole nother mind shift. That's also, I think, a scary place to be where no one really wants to say, I, I'm not needed. I'm not required. Part of that is an identity crisis in a way. We all tie a lot into our work. We care a lot about it. And saying that I'm trying to prepare for and hopefully non-existent situation where I'm not available and I don't need to be there. I'm going to take a long time off or something happens to me that I didn't expect or to your point losing a family member. When I lost my dad, it was amazing how quickly everything just disappears. And you did such an amazing job of keeping everything going, which you know, is truly incredible. And people don't like to think about those kinds of things. So we know, and we're not saying that this is an easy topic by any means, but stuff happens. And and yeah, you feel silly when some of those things happen that could have been avoided. And some of these are not avoidable. Losing my dad was not avoidable. But thinking about the other people on your team and how you can help make their lives easier too, I think is where this ties into the mindset shift of it isn't just about me. It really, like what we're
Hmm.
saying is this isn't just about you. It's about your business. It's about the other people. And some people do better when it's not about them, of thinking about other
Yeah,
people and their well-being.
I agree 100%.
Well, I do think though we should offer some suggestions and some tips because we have had a little bit of a, all right, so this is deep, but we can make this
Hmm.
fun. And when did gosh, we did that document. It's been so long, but I do want to share. It was not about Jay's finger. The document was it actually, when you think about the different ways in which someone can and cannot be available, I was concerned that what would Jay want me to do? How can I be a good steward of the business if he is not conscious? Or, what if he is in the hospital, but he's, laid up and he still wants to be involved or engaged or something? And then there's devices and all of those things. So it was more about the use of your legs, I think, than it was about your finger.
I mean, there was a lot of this stuff. But as you guys were talking, I also remembered a little bit, if you want me to share, I just remembered how we started that process.
Yeah,
Um,
let's
okay,
go
so
there.
so
Because I know, let's be fair, that wasn't easy. We might look back with
no.
rose-colored glasses, but I do recall that this was a painful process for you.
I think it was like a 2 year process we
Yeah.
worked on, at least a year. I know this was a long process and maybe we overdid it a little bit, but I have to say one of the first things that we had done is after you became the COO of StringCan and became a partner in the agency. I think one of the things that we first did was I was struggling with what are some of those bottleneck items. And so I think what we did was is that we first step one was just had me at a very simple level just journal. I spent probably a solid month of really doing a good job at documenting all the things I was working on, the tasks, how it helped the business or not. I just did it on like simple little post-it notes, and I had a ton of them. So I think that was kind of like step one. And then I looked at it, I had no clue the value it brought, but then I basically had you kind of help me go through all of that. And that was like a big aha. Like, first of all, some of the things that I was fighting you on that I thought was delivering value to the business, you're like, so you spent 23 hours on that one thing that you think made a significant difference. Tell me how it made a difference. And I couldn't give you an example. I had all this nonsense that I came up with. And so I just found that, you were challenging me on some of the things that I misunderstood the value it brought or not. And then we talked through, okay, of these items, what are the reasons why I didn't delegate to someone? Now, there were a bunch of fair items that we had no one to delegate it to. Or I believe that people were too busy. Like I had a lot of excuses, but also a lot of fair responses. And I think me and you then just really worked through, okay, where do we have gaps in the company regarding either resources, partners, processes, procedures, all those things. And I think that process we went through really helped us identify where we had obstacles that were preventing me from being more effective on reducing me being a bottleneck. So I think that, that and then it translated into us this year-long process of building out this whatever you call that document of like what if something bad happens kind of stuff so whoever is in place can be a good steward of the business. I love that kind of wording you had. I think that was kind of roughly the process we went through. And so, it took some time, a good month for identifying the things I was working on, probably a good quarter or two identifying where we had gaps in the business. And then we just spend time and we do it probably what every quarter we have these conversations of what other gaps do we have? Because again, like I never would have thought 5, 10 years ago a car would have fallen on me. Like it never would have crossed my mind that could have been a thing. And again, God, it could have been a lot worse situation. But luckily, I came out of it alive. And, after a few days, I was out of the hospital. And now I have a few months of mending to do. But, that was a huge eye opener for me that I never would have thought that could have been a thing. And luckily, me and you just followed our process with a minimal amount of emotion tied to it. And it felt like, maybe only a couple hours of stress versus I think some businesses could be weeks, if not months of stress in that kind of situation. So I would just was, again, it tested our process and it worked.
Yeah, which I think that your point about it taking a lot of time is true, and my mind is I'm probably not accurately remembering because it was a while ago, but I remember the spreadsheet because I asked you about
Oh,
how
yes.
long did you spend on the spreadsheet, and you told me it was some inordinate amount of time, and I'm
Yeah, it was
like,
crazy.
you do know that this already exists. And I think for you, it was the moment where you realized that all of the tribal knowledge now no longer lived in your head. And we
Hmm.
highly recommend you listen to that episode we did on tribal knowledge, which in this way, I think it was good. And to your point about it taking time, that's why it takes time is once someone's been ingrained and there's processes and things that have now moved beyond you, which kudos, I think, to Drew McClellan at AMI because he's ground this into every owner's head that at some
Yes.
point you need to become irrelevant. What he actually is saying is stop being the bottleneck because you your business isn't growing, it's just orbiting at that point. And that's really dangerous and it's unhealthy. Your team isn't growing. And having that conversation with you about, okay, here are the things that you're doing that you really shouldn't be doing anymore. And that takes time to kind of fill those gaps and figure out what is truly necessary. And you do have to say no to some things that you previously would have said yes to. And that doesn't necessarily feel good in the moment. But I think for you now, for me to have landed in Lisbon 8 hours later, hearing about you in the hospital, yeah, I had some panic moments, but in the my mentality was like, I know I'm not there. Me being there isn't going to change anything for the team. I trust the team and I can up my communication with them and be a lot more available, which is kind of awesome that I'm in a different time zone. But we got this, and here's how we're going to tackle the things on our plates and that you are not a bottleneck and that you can now heal without the pressure of, all this work that you're bottlenecking.
I love that. And again, I'm beyond grateful. Again, I do hope our team listens to this because, after thinking through the trouble I'm going to get into, with you and my wife Rachel and then my family and having to just tell so many other people how dumb I was. And I knew I was dumb the second it happened, or probably I should have known I was dumb before it happened. But anyways, yeah, I'm just it just the team in place being so amazing, and just so caring of the company and our clients. It's probably, I think, what's going to allow me to recover so much faster than others. And again, that's I think the benefit of this process where I have had a lot of friends who own businesses much larger than ours, tease me often about how much energy me and you spend on this kind of stuff. And I just, not that I'm glad this happened, especially to myself, but this is going to be one of those stories I'm going to be like, okay, well, let me just ask you a situation. What if a car fell on you and you were not able to work for, let's say, a few weeks? What would happen to your business? And I bet you that a lot of times they'd be like, it would fall apart. And there's nothing sadder than seeing someone that's worked, 5, 10, 20 years and built up their company to, 50 million plus dollars. And one stupid mistake that a dumb entrepreneur made that jeopardized themselves and their family and all of the hard work they did, how that can go away in a blink of an eye. And so I just feel like the all the hard work that we put in to be proactive around this, it ended up proving to be absolutely amazing. And I think there's very little that I've learned from this that I am a bottleneck with. I mean, there's been very few things of like, oh my gosh, without Jay being here this week or next week or whatever it might be, we're gonna have issues. So it's a very strange feeling, but much more positive than negative.
Yeah, and I think too, not that I do not want to toot my own horn here, but I would say that having someone else help with this process that can be very logical minded, which is really how this all started, was you going to Turkey during a very sketchy period of time. And I'm like, what happens if I don't hear from you? Or these things need, like, what kind of basically permissions do I have inside the agency if you're not around? And it was like, ooh, well, I can't do this if you're not here. And then I can't do this. And that really started the whole snowball of making sure that I had the ability to do the things that were necessary to keep the business going, which was an arduous process, unpacking all of those things. And then, making sure that you still felt like your wishes were heard, and so I do want to say that having a second person to bounce it off of that's not emotional, that can be very logical. Integrators are amazing in that space. I think I'm not going to speak for all of us, but we just need some way to move forward. Give us a path and we will execute the crap out of it. And I think that's a huge benefit to someone in your shoes or like a
I
owner entrepreneur
100%
shoes.
agree, and you definitely should toot your own horn on that because again, like it's hard to see some of this stuff, and it's so neat. And I think to your point, um, doing all this when you're not emotional, I think also is so valuable because again, when you're in the thick of things and you feel like the sky is falling, and it really is not, but when you feel like it in your head, it's really hard to rationally think things through. And so, again, what I love about our process is every quarter we just have this conversation, and sometimes a 10-minute chat, and once in a while it's an hour and a half chat, but it's not a lot of time ongoing to kind of go back and reflect. But we always do it in a non-emotional way, and it's so much easier to think about things rationally that way. And so, again, God forbid something bad happens, we have an amazing process in place to follow. Step one, two, three, and sometimes 30 steps. But it's all thought out, and there's just no emotion tied to it at that point in time. So it's a little robotic, maybe feeling, but it's just a really fresh, a weight off your shoulders essentially, or a car off your shoulders, however you want to
Oh
look at
my God. I knew you were going to say. I will say that the document will now have a footnote that says all car repairs for ownership need to be completed by a professional.
and I will comply, I hope. I'll only wrap
I'll
up with
just
that.
wait for a little bit until I add that into the document. So,
Oh God, I'm so stupid.
well, Jay, thanks for sharing your story. And we do all hope you heal up. And
I
hello
appreciate
from
that.
5,500 miles away. Miss you guys. But, we hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And Jay and I are open books, and we know this stuff isn't easy. And so if you'd like to fast forward, I don't know, 8 years worth of conversations and get this taken care of, reach out to us at podcast@stringcaninteractive.com. We're happy to have these conversations and maybe share some of the bullets from our document.
Thanks,
All
everyone.
right.
Appreciate it.
Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Revenue Rewired podcast. Send us your questions to podcast@stringcaninteractive.com and follow us for more insights to drive your business forward.